Great careers are not accidents, they're journeys built through clarity and intent. In every industry, there are such journeys that reveal true leadership, sacrifice, risk, and purpose. I'm Dirk Horne, and this is The Pitch and the Catch, where we dive into choices, changes, and the careers they create. Welcome. Today, we're joined by someone who has dedicated his career to helping leaders create workplaces where people and performance thrive together. Dr. Mike Horne is an executive coach, organization development leader, author of the People Dividend, and host of the People Dividend podcast. Today's conversation is a special one for me because it goes back more than a decade. Mike and I first met in 2012 at Genentech, where he played a pivotal role in shaping leadership behavior, organizational clarity, and the culture that made Genentech such a distinctive place to work. Since then, his journey has taken him through some of the most complex environment in business. Across more than 3 decades, Mike has shaped cultures, guided executive teams, and helped organizations navigate growth, crisis, and transformation. His work centers on a simple truth. When people flourish, companies do too. Today, we're exploring what it really means to build trust, integrity, and performance in environments where change never stops. Welcome to The Pitch and the Catch, Mike. It's great to have you on the show.
And it's wonderful to be here, Dirk. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast and to speak with your audience.
Yes, you're one of my first guests. As you know, different from you, I've just started this a couple of months ago, and I'm still very much in honeymoon with podcasting. I do have to say, I love those conversations. Hey, Mike, as I mentioned, I first got to know you at Roche or Genentech or Roche around 2012. And whenever I sat in meetings and we talked about engagement surveys, change programs, leadership standards, you were always in the mix. But in a way, you felt less like a regular employee and more like an internal consultant or entrepreneur, like someone who shows up when it's important and has a really meaningful contribution. And I do have to say, after checking out your latest book, The People Dividend, it seems like that this kind of role plays exactly into your idea of looking at people as an appreciating asset and not as a cost center. So if possible, I'd love to go back. How would you describe that role back then, what you were doing back then at Roche Genentech?
I think you did a really nice job of it, Dirk. That was an organization that, in a way, had a lot of luxury, particularly on the Genentech side. I think there had just been like 9 FDA approvals in a row. And it was a role as an internal consultant, and it was something that I had developed familiarity with. I did very similar work at Marriott International, where I supported the chief operating officer who ran most of the company's revenue. But it's an opportunity to engage with people. There are enough people who are talented enough, smart enough, better than I am at working the task side of the organization. My role has always been to work on the human side of the organization. I think it goes back to the giants who sat, who were my mentors, teachers. I really think about Doug McGregor. I mean, Theory X, Theory Y. And Doug said that executive coaching and organization development are really sort of two sides of the same, different sides of the same coin. So that's where I engage. That's where I think I can make a difference with people and certainly make a difference with myself.
Yes. So let's stay with the Genentech role a little bit. It's interesting you say luxury. So is it an element of luxury that you can afford someone like Mike Horne who has the knowledge and appears, sometimes it was really like you appeared in meetings and appears in meetings and adds puts his weight behind certain issues that need to be brought forward. Is that a luxury today?
I think in a lot of organizations, it can be a luxury, though I don't think coaching should be considered in that regard. The reason, because I've worked in other companies, I think about one where I went as a CHRO successor and basically had responsibility for everything other than compensation. And, you get pressed into service differently in organizations when financially things aren't going so well.
Correct. Yes.
It's everybody who's, smart enough or able enough to work on divestitures, mergers. So things do get pressed into service, I think, a little bit differently. And that's why I describe it as a luxury. Though I think it's a skill that many people benefit, that many executives can benefit from is having another voice.
And I think most executives would actually agree with you.
Most of my clients, I'd say almost all of
All
my
of them.
clients, are very
Yeah.
successful people.
Yes.
I mean, they've succeeded academically. I work with a lot of technologists and scientists, people who have impressive academic careers, impressive bodies of experience with them. So they're generally successful people. And I think the difference of working with someone like you or like working with someone like me is that you're able to help them step out of the task environment for a moment or two and think about how people really make the difference in organizational life, particularly people who are working in pairs. Most innovation happens in pairs. So, for an executive to work with his or her or their team more effectively is a way of bringing out the best in people. And you know as well as I do, I mean, we've seen so many low energy teams in our careers, and you compare those against high performing teams, companies that are doing well, teams that are doing well, people succeeding. The difference is often this executive who pays attention to the human side of things.
Yes. Funny enough, I just had the conversation about low energy teams twice this morning.
Uh huh.
And we get to all sort of consequences in our heads when a team has low energy. My point, and I'm curious what you think, my point is always it's not necessarily that you have the wrong people. It's the entire way how it is set up and how much energy we put into that environment. And too often we have a conversation and we don't have the right people. And often I do have to say I don't agree. It's not the people are not the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, systems always trump people. So well intentioned people,
Yes.
good people can be trumped by a bad system. Systems that encourage uh, poor performance or lack of performance, or that don't motivate people to do their best. And I think we also have, broad generational differences at play at work and the experience, how people experience organizations today. I sort of grew up in an era of men and women of the corporation. It's a book by Rosabeth Moss Kanter. And today, people have different experiences of what organizations mean. I mean, the advancing gig economy, regardless of what you think, I mean, there has been a shortening of the work week in the United States, and we're probably at the dawn of the 4-day work week sooner rather than later. Variable work locations, all of these cause people to experience organizations in different ways. So I hear some of my clients now, typically people who are in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, who have seen a little bit of life, saying, how do I engage younger workers in my organization?
It's
And I think it's a matter of accessibility for some.
Is that an artifact that we kind of ask ourselves the question, how do I engage Gen Z? But is it not, is it, I don't think it's too complicated, but maybe I'm approaching it in a too simplistic way. Uh,
Reflecting on what you were saying with a client, and
yeah.
when you're a chief X in an organization, chief technical officer, chief manufacturing officer, chief whatever, you're on the C-suite. I don't think it's unusual for people to clam up around you because power and authority issues are real. So when an executive says that, as she did earlier this week to me, that I just put it back and say, well, what is it about you that's causing you not to feel that you're getting information? We can look at that system then and see what
Yes.
the challenges are. Yeah.
The CEO of one of my clients, the country CEO, says here they have 14 maps at the moment, management, associate program, something. So these are Gen Z in their 20s. And he says they are insanely energetic. It's basically he comes in through the door at 8 in the morning. They're already waiting for him and say, what do you have for us? We want to grow. We want to learn. We want to make an impact. So that maybe there are Gen Z because we always say they're lacking energy. I don't have that experience at all. And this is, I
Yeah.
think it's, yeah.
It's how the executive frames his or her or their
Yes,
accessibility and availability
right.
back to
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
I mentioned earlier about surveys and engagement surveys. And I often think the best advice that I can give well, there are several pieces of great advice that I give executives, but one is get out of your chair.
Hmm.
Ask people a question. Don't wait for survey says. It's never too late, but it's certainly not enough on time. So, one thing is just get out of your chair and ask people a question. A second piece of advice that I think helps with this communication issue, and this is our most underrated and perhaps underutilized technology that executives can employ, and that's just to say hello, not just to see people as an element of production, but to see that person as a unique human being with their own needs and concerns and wants and all of that sort of stuff. So just taking this act of saying hello or hi can be a real game changer in terms of, because typically an executive doesn't know what happened to you 5 minutes before you were meeting with them or what's going to happen to you 5 minutes after. So it's to use this time effectively with those with whom you interact.
Yeah. When we amazing when we go from the individual to more the systemic perspective. So you talk a lot about reinvention, both personal and systemic, in the People Dividend. Like organization. Here's a quote from you: "Organizations reinvent themselves when leaders confront reality with honesty, humility, and discipline." What patterns do you see in organizations that successfully reinvent themselves? And where do most organizations get stuck?
Organizations get stuck because of bad leadership. I mean, we have so much bad leadership in organizations, despite, 60 years of social psychology or industrial organizational psychology that tells us that, we select for functional expertise. You get promoted because of your technical expertise. You don't get promoted because of your leadership skills. Engagement is at a near all-time low in the United States. We
It
have
is.
just too many bad leaders out there. Part of that has been created because of the erosion of middle management in companies. People have bigger teams. AI is doing all kinds of things. I mean, in the discipline of human resources, there isn't a part of HR that hasn't been touched. And the larger the organization, the more you see AI, whether it's in performance management, whether it's somebody else writing your development plan, whether it's your ability to access solutions to your development issues, whether it's hiring, even first level employee relations, all successfully handled by robots at this point.
Yeah. You often say leadership is simple but not easy. I think that's a great way to put it. Where do you see leaders maybe overcomplicating their role or not living their role to the full extent? And what would a simplified version of leadership look like in practice?
Simplified version of leadership, because complex is easy, simple is difficult.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think for leaders, most effective a way to be effective, other than again saying hello, is to focus on organizational purpose and personal purpose.
Mm.
Really being keen on maybe purpose and values of your organization, what you want to accomplish over the next period of time, and then consistently reinforcing that purpose and those values. That is a way to really begin to move the needle, to change the conversation in an organization. And that's the focus on purpose and values. When there's disagreement in teams, disagreement is healthy in teams.
It helps
And
you. Yeah.
people argue over methods, processes. And when we have conversations about value and purpose, teams tend to look up, they lift their nose up from the grindstone and they perform better, because usually everybody can get behind a paying customer or customer, however that's defined. So, I think that's key, is really being clear on your purpose, knowing your values. You can't get everyone to agree with you about everything. So you might as well help people tune into the higher purpose.
So, well, while you were talking, I had actually two Mark Twain quotes. I don't know. I always have a favorite quote. Two Mark Twain,
Nice.
no Mark Twain. So the first one is, but I'm going to the second one in a bit. First one is, if you ask me to speak for an hour, I can do it right away. If you ask me to speak for 5 minutes, I need 3 days of preparation. So that is, I think, speaking to your complex is easy. Simplifying is hard.
Simplifying is hard.
Simplifying is hard. And organizational purpose, personal purpose. And here's the second Mark Twain quote. I'm really curious what you think of this. He said, "There's two important days in the life of a human being. The first day is when you were born, and the second day is when you find out why." And I think that's what that second day when you find out why, that is very much connected to purpose. What does the coach play in that journey for that leader?
For sure. AI is a tool that is increasingly helpful in coaching and development. There are more resources that are available to people. What I do as a coach and organization development consultant is bring a keen awareness of who I am and what I'm capable of. And for me, this is about directing the significance of my life with my clients,
Yeah.
about living out this purpose of helping others and adding value to their work so that they can enjoy um, the elements of success or the elimination of some pain that they have. Um, so for me, that's where the focus is. It is about finding your purpose, living out that purpose. Most people, when they know their purpose, they can also have relatively disciplined approaches
Yes.
because that disciplined approach simply is a manifestation of honoring your purpose.
So when you coach, Mike, and you have this amazing breadth of experience, what usually creates the breakthrough?
I think there are several things that create breakthroughs in coaching. One is clarity of goal or clarity of purpose. I'm lucky enough because, again, most of the people I work with are very successful and therefore they've been goal oriented. So I really like working with goal directed, goal oriented people. And I find that part of what makes coaching successful is having a goal. So many people meander or weave their way in and out of conversation that at the end of 6 months or 3 months, whatever the engagement is, it really hasn't made any difference. So being clear about your purpose, your why, what you're trying to do. The second thing is, again, having a disciplined approach to, getting feedback, doing assignments, reflection. Without a disciplined approach, you lose a lot of energy. And I think the third thing would be to make it time bound. I mean, this isn't something that goes on forever. Put some time boundaries around it. Maybe that's not unlike having a SMART goal. I don't know. I'm hesitant to say that, but, I think there's specific, measurable, achievable. Those are all things that really help in an assignment.
Yeah, I think that that is one of the ground rules that even coaching has a beginning and an end.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I work a lot in transitions. If I think about what's common, I mean, I think about this question a lot. What's common in organizations? What's common to organizations? The only thing that's really common to organizations is that eventually they all die. They all expire. I mean, that's one
Yeah.
thing that organizations have in common. Otherwise, they have so many unique properties. And I think for executives, it's really about, what pain can I eliminate that, is deterring me from our collective success.
Mhm.
People get to that in all different kinds of ways, whether it's somebody from the board telling them they need some coaching, whether it's their peer group, but it's best if it's self identified and a person sets a goal, take a disciplined approach to achieving it, and they seek help.
Yeah.
I mean, really empowered people know when to seek help.
Yes. The thing is, are we there yet that it is actually you can have, psychological safety wise, that a leader can actually say, I need help? Because as you said, they were promoted because they overperformed in the role they had before. So they were promoted because they were superstars. And now they get to the next level where maybe that superpower they had isn't as effective as they used to. Can that person easily ask for help?
And I think it's the serendipitous nature of the coaching relationship. Some clients you develop because you sit next to them on an airplane. Some clients because it's a referral from somebody else. It is often a serendipitous route into executive coaching. I think the answer is yes. That it's really about if you want to continue to succeed, then you usually have figured out a way in your technical life to get others to assist you on that journey. It's very much the same with the human side of organizational life.
Yes. Yeah. Ideally you have.
Ideally.
Ideally you have, because I think corporate development systems still are very much geared towards who made the most revenue, and looks the prettiest while making that revenue. And these people get promoted.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. Mike, for the leaders that are listening, if there's one discipline or behavior a leader could start tomorrow that would create a real people dividend, what would it be?
Again, to say hello to other people,
It's that
to say
simplicity.
hello. It's that simple. that begins to create the people dividend. Next, clarity of purpose and clarity of values. I mean, those work that we are entering an era where the differentiators of organizations that excel will be dignity, kindness, respect, these humanistic values that shape a person's experience.
Interesting you say that because that's exactly where I wanted to go. Let's pivot from
hmm
leadership and coaching because you're an organizational expert. You have immense experience and network in your space, and based on that experience, what is the next thing? What is the thing that we're not talking about enough? What do we see on the horizon? We really should more focus on it, but we don't.
It's interesting. Must be about 15 years ago now. I participated in a 3-year symposium, so maybe 15 to 12 years ago. And it was on the future of organization development. They gathered the top 100 experts in the United States, and we met at a conference room for a couple days each year of those 3 years. And of course, our first discussion, whenever this started 15 or 20 years ago, was AI. That's what we were talking about. The first presenter had a robot in front of the room or something, completing tasks. So I think this is an issue that we still are coming to terms with, what it means in terms of knowledge in organizations. When I gave a presentation recently to a group of HR executives on AI in the workplace, there were different patterns that were at play. Some organizations were saying, they fully embraced AI, do whatever large language models, do whatever you can. There were others where the boss would say, well, you can use it at home and then cut and paste it and then bring it into work. And others that completely, disallowed any communication with artificial intelligence or large language models. And I think that this represents one of the distinctions that we have to continue to have organizations that and leaders who are comfortable in this permanent white water. We've had, I think, what somebody's reporting is the largest number of layoffs in the fourth quarter in like years in the U.S. economy. So I think there's a lot of challenges around agility and how do we adapt. So successful leaders will learn to be agile and adaptive in their leadership skills.
Talking and I'm just amazed you talked about AI 12 years ago. You were very much on the forefront of everything. It's a more operational question for you, Mike. Billions are poured into AI programs. I mean, just Oracle has a backlog of work of $500 billion, which is an insanity in itself. And I happened to talk to a few IT people, and they said, okay, so we know 95% of that money will be ineffective. At the moment, it's just that the board wants to see us put that money in. But secondly, they said, what we completely miss out is the change management piece, the effect it has on and I don't want to say workforce, but on the people working in the organizations on a broader scale. They said, Dirk, there's a business case for pitching change management to those AI projects. How are you looking at this?
I think that's an interesting approach. And I think it's probably a valid approach for many organizations. My work focuses on transition as opposed to change management. So I'm a long time ago, I studied with a guy named William Bridges, who was sort of the expert on transitions, holding on, letting go, not being so afraid of the past that you can't let go of it, not being so afraid of the future that you can't embrace it, but it's what happens in between. And I think what's common among all of my clients, whether they're organizational clients doing a redesign of their team or their unit, or whether it's an individual executive, what's common is they're all in some sort of transition. And it's how you handle that transition that makes all the difference in life. I mean, Bill Bridges would describe it formerly as if you imagine one of those Snoopy characters or Peanuts characters, and the one Linus who held a blanket all the time. The transition is when Linus didn't have the blanket. It's when the blanket's in the washer or the dryer or something like that. So this is, I think, where I'm often engaged with folks. What's common in those experiences is the idea of transition.
And that might seem a funny question, but doesn't the transition require change management? Just technically.
I think so. And a lot of times when I think about change management, it's much more technical. I think,
Yes.
requires skills in project management and so many organizational consultants do that so successfully as sort of an N of one, author, podcaster, consultant, teacher, I really work on the one-to-one experience or the one-to-few. Let me work with a senior leadership team that's interested in their redesign of their organization to make it increasingly effective. Let's work on the redesign as it relates to AI and how that's changing work in our organizations. So these constants of relationships, structure, rewards, mechanisms, and how they help each other. I think these provide us with lots of fodder for change work in organizations, whether that's the management of change or whether that's working at the transition point. So that's where I would think about myself. Look, I had collected all those certifications a long time ago, pro size certifications, and so I know a little bit about change management, but it's where I direct my energy at this point was really on transition as opposed to change,
Yes. So
which
if
even differs from transformation.
I was about to go there, I know what a transition is, but help me better understand what transition is when you say transition.
It's the period in between holding on and letting go. It's what's in the middle between the old order and the new order. Transitions everything that happens in between. I think the way they would think about it is that change is often an external event that you have no control over. Company
Yes.
decides to lay off people. That has nothing to do with, your performance, your anything. It just has to do with the financial decision of the company. So it's how do you manage that transition successfully? Which change is something that happened externally. Markets crashed. Unbeknown, now what do we do? So that's where I focus on transition.
Okay. And how often does it appear in a leader's life that they need to transition from what is it personally, organizationally? So how often should they manage transitions in their
Well, there are a
personal
couple
journey?
places where coaching can be very, very helpful. One is when a person's taking on a new role. They've moved into their first VP role. They've moved into their first multi-unit team role. That's a really good time for some coaching when you've been promoted into a new role. That's a transition point.
Yes.
Another
Transition
really
points.
good time is when you're a successful executive and you've gotten some feedback that says things aren't really working the way you've done them before.
Yes.
That's a good opportunity to be in transition. Also, I do a lot of work with people, unfortunately, who have been laid off now recently.
Yep.
Executives who, and they're recharting their next path, thinking about what am I going to do next? So it's not an ending conversation, but it's this transition. And, I can't help people answer the question about how long will this take? Will it take me 6 months or a year? But eventually everyone does land. Well, not everyone, but most people do land.
They land somewhere, maybe not what they expected where they would land. So
Yes.
a lot of my clients, interesting enough, aged out. So aged out
Uh-huh.
is like they reach the end of their 50s and they still have this idea of my next step should be again up and bigger. And a lot of them have to, learn the lesson that at some point in time that changes. It's not about the next big step. It's about serving, purpose, helping, developing others. That transition is a huge transition for many.
Yes, and even with extended life, so Linda Grattan wrote a book a while ago, The 100-Year Life,
Mhm.
is to think about that in terms of work. And if
Yes.
more and more people live to 100, what does it mean when you're still working in your 70s or 80s? As a consultant, I've had bad role models all my life. Everybody's worked until they're still working today, or they work until they die. So my role
Yeah,
models have been bad.
yeah, because
I
we
think that's a
like
little
it.
unique to consulting, though, and certainly not to executive life in corporations.
Yeah. The one thing that I see at the moment very much, everybody who is either laid off or steps out becomes an executive coach. That's
There is
everywhere.
a
So
lot
this
of
is
that.
why there's a lot of that. So this is why I stopped, and this is maybe now is the conversation for the coaches that are listening. I actually stopped saying I'm an executive coach because it's a commodity on the market. So what's the quality criteria for an executive coach when everybody's an executive coach?
I hear from my colleagues, particularly in the university community, that there are folks who have launched coaching and consulting businesses, and they're not doing very well. People don't often realize that, this is a business too. And you better have some entrepreneurs as role models
Yes.
to
Yes.
do this.
And
This is a
challenge of
business.
and the challenge of creating your sales channel and your leads is I've seen the most amazing coaches, but acquiring work, not enough entrepreneurial spirit for this. But once they were in the coaching situation with a leader, they were the most amazing coaches.
Yes, and, for coaches listening, I think I've been through so many different things, mass mailings where we're mailing, 6 or 700 people a day with cold emails. I've been through, more personalized approaches to business development. And you got to figure out what your flow is because there are enough people out there who are selling services to coaches. It's a full-time business deleting their emails.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in that space of being a coach, I get 2 emails per day of someone wanting to create my lead channel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, last question. We talk much about transition of leaders and everything. Just curious, when did you have to reinvent yourself the last time? What did that look like? You as Mike the professional, the coach. What was your last reinvention?
Well, I think I'm in the midst of one right now. I think about where my university work is headed and how that fits into my um, flywheel. Somewhere along the way, my dissertation advisor told me that I had an obligation to teach. So I've been working on that for a long time now, to helping develop others in human resources. So I'm thinking about, what's next there. I'm thinking about how to scale and how to make more of me available to
Hmm.
younger leaders, people
Yes.
who are in their 30s. That's where I'm really trying to do a transition right now is to reach out to others who might not have the money, the resources, and to do some work with them. And that's what I'm trying to figure out now. How do I get more? How do I use more of myself, bring more of my value to younger people?
Yeah. Yeah. And because the thing is, the day is only so many hours also for you.
Right. So I'm thinking about, some group coaching models. I'm thinking about, how can I, help 10 people at once or not help. Help is the right word. How can I help 10
Help.
people at once?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's,
And what I'm also thinking about transitioning, the second point is, a lot of my work is done on Zoom. It's one-to-one coaching. It sort of works pretty well. Usually I'd like to meet an executive in person once. Not always necessary though. But to do this group work, it's really important to be on site. And I'm glad to see so many people back at work and on site because there is something that happens with group work.
yes, it is such a big difference when everybody's breathing the same air.
Mhm.
Well, Mike, it's been such an honor to have you on the
It's an
show.
honor to be in conversation with you, Dirk Horne.
No, actually, the pleasure's all mine. Hey, let me wrap this up a little bit. So, from shaping workforce strategy early in your career to coaching today's leaders through uncertainty and transition, your insights on trust, culture, and authenticity remind me, and I think also many others of the people that work with you, that people, not systems, create the conditions for performance. And your perspective is a powerful call to invest in the behaviors, relationships, and principles that allow leaders and with that, their teams and entire organizations to do their best work, I think. And for everyone who's listening, you can find Mike's book, The People Dividend, and his podcast in the description below. Go check them out. They're a great resource for anyone looking to lead with more clarity and integrity. Mike, thank you for the amazing conversation. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dirk. I really have enjoyed being in conversation with you.